Good morning, everyone. My name is Latoya Smith. I head the External Relations Unit at the Central Bank, and it is a pleasure to welcome you here to this learning series webinar, which is the first for the year. The Central Bank started this initiative um, last year as a part of its 50th anniversary public education campaign, and we had about 6 sessions. Um, on various topics relating to the central bank's core mandate as well as the economy. Um, at the bank, public education is a very critical aspect of our external communication strategy because we believe that a well-informed public will make better economic decisions about their households and businesses. We are therefore very happy to continue these series this year and believe today's content is particularly timely and beneficial. In an age of digital transformation, the way we work, the way we bank, the way we do business is largely digital, especially coming out of the pandemic. This is beneficial because technology brings increased efficiency. It allows for greater productivity, and these things are, of course, when technology is properly and effectively employed. It can be safer, it can be faster, it can be more secure. But we do recognize that with the rewards of technology, there are still some risks that we should pay attention to. And so we should embrace technology, but do so with the appropriate amount of caution. Today's session will go into this topic in greater detail, discussing the nexus between cybersecurity and digital banking, as well as provide some tips on responsible use of digital banking and technology. Our speaker today is Mr. Luther Smith, and he is the Central Bank's Manager of Information Security. He leads the strategic development and implementation of the bank's cybersecurity framework, and he's been at the bank for just over 15 years. So he definitely has a wealth of knowledge and experience to share with the participants today. So with that, I will conclude my welcome and welcome Luther to take the floor.
Yes, good morning and thank you, Latoya. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this learning series, where we'll be discussing cybersecurity and its impact on digital banking. And hopefully, I'm able to leave you with some useful information to take away and apply. So before we dive into it, permit me to walk through the agenda. So firstly, the intent is to bring some awareness to, what is cybersecurity? What does it involve? How is it applied in our use of technology? Next, I will discuss digital banking, some of the key aspects of digital banking, and provide some common applications for it. Then we will move on to show the convergence between cybersecurity and digital banking through a discussion on the various phases, illustrating some of the direct linkages, and then highlighting the evolving threat landscape. And finally, I intend to wrap up with a discussion on the types of cybersecurity threats, those most prevalent in the financial sector. We'll highlight those, discuss a few high-profile cyber breaches, how cybersecurity enables digital banking, and then stakeholder responsibilities, or rather what role each of us ought to play in ensuring a secure digital environment. So, I've put up here some industry definitions as prescribed by industry. But essentially, cybersecurity is focused on ensuring that individuals and organizations reduce their risk of falling victim to a cyber attack. That's essentially the purpose, right? And among the core principles are ensuring confidentiality and the integrity of both the systems and the data that they manage, while also um, ensuring that systems remain consistently available to deliver their services. So the goal is to ensure that confidential information is not disclosed to unauthorized parties, that the information is accurate and free from errors, and that the system and applications, as I would have indicated earlier, remain consistently available. There are, however, other elements of cybersecurity that are less talked about, but just as important, and these are authenticity and non-repudiation. So when we talk about authenticity, this asserts that the data is genuine and it originates from the source that is purported to have provided it, right? While the latter, or non-repudiation, is focused on ensuring that a party cannot deny that they would have performed a particular action, or in the sense of an email, in the case of an email, deny that they would have sent that particular email. So now then, arising from those core principles are our set of goals, and I will just highlight a few. And those are a few that really stand out from a financial sector perspective, right? And these are protecting customer data, securing financial transactions, protecting critical infrastructure, which we consider the bank to manage. This is critical infrastructure for the nation, and compliance with local or national and international standards and regulations. As a provider of digital services, if we do a good enough job at conforming to these principles and applying them to the identified use cases, then the result should be um, customer trust and confidence, the safeguarding of our national security, and paramount for the central bank is maintaining a stable financial ecosystem. So now, having talked a bit about cybersecurity, let's delve a little bit into digital banking. And of course, this is not my primary discipline, but by the nature of the work that I do in the institution that I work for, there's clearly a need for me to have some level of awareness and knowledge of the digital platforms that we support. So digital banking um, is essentially, if I were to put it in layman terms, essentially providing banking services via mediums like websites and mobile apps, right? Rather than your traditional bank and mortar, rather than through your traditional bank and mortar or branch locations. Okay. So with some limitations, because there are still ongoing advancements that are happening, but with some limitations, it really affords individuals the flexibility to access and manage their financial products online, and more particularly, moving closer towards 24/7 access, right? Digital banking has drastically improved accessibility, efficiency, and convenience by providing a myriad of benefits, particularly focused around cost savings and time savings. Okay. The transition then to digital banking has really caused a shift in how we view and tackle security, as it introduced a new set of risk. Um, it further necessitates increased awareness campaigns to promote technology literacy, and stronger, more intense focus on operational resiliency and stability. And when we talk about operational resiliency and stability, we're talking about the systems that are supporting these online and mobile services. So there has to be an increased focus on ensuring that those systems are maintained, are consistently available to service our constituents. So the systems must stay up at the end of the day. Now, as we look at the evolution of cybersecurity and digital banking, So cybersecurity, as we appreciate it today, didn't always exist. Again, didn't always exist in the way that we appreciate it today. Neither did digital banking. And though they are discrete disciplines, their growth and maturity mirror each other rather closely, right? As the technology matured and modernized, so did the prominence and need for cybersecurity. So during the early days, well, during the 1980s, when there was a small digital presence, primarily limited to ATM machines, cybersecurity practices were very basic, and we're very basic. And as technology evolved to incorporate online and mobile banking, and central bank digital currencies came around, and then there was the proliferation, I would say, of mobile wallets. We then started to see a similar evolution in the sophistication and frequency of cyber attacks, and also too the development of more robust cybersecurity solutions, comprehensive regulations, and industry frameworks to help detect and defend against these threats. So, cybersecurity in banking today has evolved from the very basic, I guess, transaction based protection to the point now where we're leveraging AI driven systems to be able to detect complex threats and anomalous or unusual patterns that may be likely indicators of fraudulent activity. As for the future, because technology nor the industry as a whole is stagnant. So as we look to the future, quantum computing, which is likely or is capable of solving problems much quicker than existing computer systems today, perhaps will create one of the greatest opportunities and challenges for both cybersecurity and digital banking. Because while the productivity gains are easily identifiable, its impact on encryption could both enhance and weaken security measures. Because what we anticipate today through quantum computing is that it may very well render the encryption standards that we know today to be obsolete. So planning for and accounting for the transition in the advent or the adoption or the broader adoption of this emerging technology is something that we have to be very mindful of and understand what the impact is going to look like relative to cybersecurity. So each new push then towards further digitization comes with its fair share, I should say, of risk and reward. Hence, the need for us to stay abreast of the technology trends, know the risk, and then follow the prescriptions to mitigate them. In a lot of cases, we're not reinventing the wheel. There have been guidance that has been provided. There are lessons learned from events that have already occurred that we can then use to apply the appropriate security controls in our environment to ensure that we maintain a safe and sound digital environment, digital banking environment. So digital banking then and its continued growth and adoption has contributed directly to an evolving threat landscape, cyber threat landscape. Cyber threats in digital banking have evolved from basic phishing attacks to advanced and organized, coordinated attacks that target both financial institutions and their customers, right? This has then forced banks to take more proactive approach to security, take a layered approach to security, so having multiple levels of protections, and then constantly reviewing and adapting defenses to meet the threats of the day. So I just want to pause there for a minute, just to recap briefly, because what I would have gone through just now really just sets the tone for the remainder of the presentation. So the topic being what it is, cybersecurity and its importance in digital banking. We've defined cybersecurity. We've defined digital banking, and then we would have illustrated side by side the progression of each discipline and how they would have supported each other through their continued evolution. So next then, financial institutions no doubt will continue to embrace technology, and that would be to maintain competitiveness and to diversify its product offerings, which also means that we will continue to be faced with evolving threats that have the potential to compromise the security of financial services. Cyber attacks come in many forms, and of the many, phishing and ransomware are the most common targeting financial institutions, right? So this is not to suggest that we're not susceptible or can fall victim to the others, but phishing and ransomware, more specifically, are the means by which cyber criminals and threat actors typically target financial institutions. So phishing usually, if we delve into it just a bit, phishing usually involves a deceptive email, website, or message that's crafted to trick individuals into revealing personal information, like your username and password, bank account details, etc. And the messages usually appear to be from a legitimate source, a known source, and it's urging the recipient to either update some account information, verify account details, or in instances, click on a malicious link. And using these methods, cyber criminals then gain access to bank accounts and other sensitive data. I'll draw your attention to the slide that's displaying the common attack types, and I think you would see there an SMS message that was sent, phishing SMS message that was sent, purporting themselves to be CIBC, right? And this is common. We've seen this for a number of financial institutions, and the important thing here is to be able to identify the fact that this is not the way that your financial institution would typically communicate with you. And I think having that level of awareness, number one, in terms of, okay, what is the manner in which your institution shares information, is important. Beyond that, it's also important to just not click on links, to really try to assess the message and its relevance and credibility, and then avoid clicking on links that are unfamiliar. Moving on then to ransomware. Ransomware attack can typically be introduced via phishing methods, but the intent here is a bit different, and that it usually involves the encryption of data, thereby locking you out of your system, or otherwise rendering the systems unusable until some demand for payment that is made has been satisfied. The primary goal of a ransomware attack is typically centers around service disruption, data theft. There's obviously some financial component to it, and in instances too, sometimes the goal is just to cause or to bring about reputational damage. And again, reiterating, the delivery method is usually via, some phishing email or some other form of social engineering. Something as rudimentary as dropping a USB stick or USB drive in the parking lot, and you or we as unsuspecting individuals, taking that USB drive and plugging it in our computers, and as simple as that, we're infected. Um, but two, not as common as those previously mentioned, but AI deepfakes are also becoming increasingly popular. And I thought it important to mention it. By no means is it, either number one or number two in terms of the targeted approaches. Um, but we should anticipate that its use will grow. So AI deepfakes are typically where cyber criminals leverage AI technology, artificial intelligence, to create false or misleading content, videos or images, right, that impersonates another individual. So cases have already arisen where persons were duped into divulging sensitive information and authorizing financial transactions by way of deepfakes. Further, um, the central bank, we have had our own experience with deepfakes, with deepfake campaigns, that is, that really sought to leverage the credibility of the central bank to promote fraudulent financial schemes. Um, so, regrettably, um, cyber incidents targeting financial institutions continue to increase. And there are many notable incidents globally that have been documented and that can aid in our understanding about how to prevent future occurrences and falling victim as others would have. The most impactful of these attacks have led to increased regulation and uh, stringent compliance frameworks in an effort to bolster security of the financial sector in particular. I'll refer to the Swift hack at the Bangladesh Bank, which occurred in no actually occurred in November of 2016, I believe it was, right? But in any event, the Swift payment service provider, um, um, in response to this incident, developed a set of Swift security standards that each bank using its service was required to implement, right? That is how impactful this incident was. So it wasn't just one of those one-off incidents where we make note of it and we attempt to patch the system or we implement some new controls. No, this actually sparked a global payments provider to develop a security framework and standard that it mandated that each participant prescribe to, right, and or adhere to. And this framework continues to evolve. And when I say evolve, there are mandatory controls today that must be implemented. And then there are those that are considered to be advisory, which they're suggesting that you should implement. But over time, what we see, and year by year, we see the progression of those advisory controls to mandatory. Um, so just going back to this heist a bit. So in this heist, cyber criminals attempted to steal roughly $1 billion, right? And this is US dollars. But instead, at the end of the day, they were only successful in being able to get away with roughly about 101 million odd. Um, the cyber criminals compromised the Central Bank of Bangladesh computers using employee credentials to gain access to the system and then submit fraudulent transactions. But luckily, and this demonstrates some of the strength in the system, because luckily the Federal Reserve Bank of New York flagged several of the transfers and was thus able to limit the haul, and hence why the cyber criminals was only able to successfully get away with 101 million, and that was a result of controls and um, detection methods deployed by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. But continuing on, though, the bank was fined, the Bank of Bangladesh, that is, was fined $53 million for non-compliance with banking laws and regulations. The bank was ridiculed as being incompetent, and ultimately, the then governor of the bank resigned. The Bangladesh, this incident took place over 10 years ago, but nonetheless remains relevant as it highlights the risk associated with outdated and weak controls. And the fact that the reputation of the bank was called into question, the trust and confidence in the system was diminished, and ultimately it led to the resignation again of the then governor of the bank. So this is serious business. This is not something that can be relaxed about. There are very, very serious implications for not adhering to good cybersecurity practices and maintaining good cyber hygiene. Another one I'd refer to is, and this is more recent, just in June of this year, just last month, through an elaborate phishing scheme, scammers attempted to steal almost $15 million from CIBC, Trinidad and Tobago. The attack was carried out by, again, an elaborate phishing scheme via WhatsApp and email. And according to some of the preliminary reports, because the investigations are not completed as yet, but based on some of the preliminary reports, the managing director of the bank would have received WhatsApp messages and emails with instructions from the bank CEO directing them to fulfill transactions, bearing in mind that the CEO was unaware of this, right? Nonetheless, this underscores the reality of the threats today, right? Advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, despite the great benefits that it will provide, also enable cyber criminals to, I guess, to be more efficient at launching cyber attacks. So as opposed to taking weeks and/or months, cyber criminals can rapidly profile an individual, right? Understand their habits, understand their communication patterns, and thereby launch a targeted attack that fits the profile of the individual and/or appeals to their senses. So all of that said, at the end of the day, cybersecurity is an enabler, or can be viewed as an enabler for digital banking. It's surely how I view it and how I approach it. And it's an enabler in the sense that it promotes confidence and reliability in the financial system. This trust is important to ensure that the continued modernization and diversification of financial products that then has the potential to promote inclusiveness, efficiency, ease of business, and economic growth. Therefore, without good cyber hygiene, it would be inconceivable that digital banking could exist in its current form. More specifically, cybersecurity relative to digital banking provides protections for customer data, prevents fraud, builds trust, and promotes innovation in the space. As as service providers and customers, we each have our respective roles to play when we talk about preserving the security of digital banking. Digital banking has, in essence, extended the traditional teller counter to the customer mobile device. Hence, customers or consumers of these products must also take adequate precautions to safeguard their devices and the mobile applications that are deployed on them. While financial institutions then, like the central bank, focus our efforts on shoring up the core application security and the underlying infrastructure that supports it. And I would also be remiss if I did not mention in this instance too, that we also must play our role as is the purpose of, as part of the purpose of this session today, or this part of the series today, is to impart knowledge and raise awareness around the risk that exists and ways that we both as individuals and as a financial ecosystem, the steps that we can take to protect ourselves and mitigate against these risks. Institutions then should implement strong security controls to not only detect but prevent and respond to cyber attacks. So the approach has to be holistic. So ultimately, we want to prevent them, but the approach needs to take in consideration our response in the event that we do fall victim to an attack. It is likewise important to maintain an enterprise risk management program that incorporates cybersecurity and regularly assesses the potential risk to the institution. To be effective, security consciousness must be embedded in the culture of the organization with strong support from senior leadership. And I think this is where, well, I know from a central banking perspective, that is definitely where we are, where we continue to aspire to be. And likewise, I think we see similar traction in the industry more broadly. And lastly, there needs to be strong emphasis on developing and maintaining cyber incident response plans. I would have alluded to this a bit earlier. To be able to put us in a position where we can effectively respond in the event of a cyber incident, so as to be able to essentially recover as quickly as possible. The customer, on the other hand, have much more specific prescriptions, right? Which includes the use of passwords, strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, encrypting personal devices, and as a general practice, just really staying abreast of recommended security practices, right? I know a lot of times, we talk about strong passwords, but a few things I would like to highlight regarding passwords. One of the key things is that you want to try to avoid using the same password for multiple accounts. I think we find this far too often. And the thing is, you just want to limit the landscape for compromise, right? So if you bank with multiple financial institutions and you have mobile apps, accounts related to each of them, try to use, to the extent it's possible, use different username and passwords. And also you want to change your passwords regularly. Some of these controls are enforced by the applications that the bank deploy, but I think it's still important that you be mindful of them and ensure that you adhere to these practices. Deploy multi-factor authentication. This simply adds another layer of protection, requiring a second form of identification, and this could be a code on your phone that is used in addition to your password. And then be very cautious or suspicious, I should say. I think suspicious is probably more accurate a term. Be suspicious of emails and links. So if it's not from a known sender, or if the link, isn't one that um, appears to be familiar, question it. Always be prepared to ask questions, and or remain suspicious. And you want to monitor your accounts regularly as well. Um, so you want to look for any type of anomalous transaction that may have occurred, and you want to report those immediately to your financial institution. These are all steps that you can take to help shore up the environment. Um, Also, too, we all like to use public Wi-Fi, and sometimes you may find yourself in a position where it's unavoidable. But one of the things that I would encourage now is that you take the opportunity to purchase one of those VPN products that you can install on your mobile devices to add that layer of protection, um, or security when you do find yourself connecting to public Wi-Fi. Um, so then, with cyber threats then becoming more advanced, both banks and customers need to stay alert and take proactive measures to protect their data. All right, we each have a role in this, which I hope I would have alluded to with some clarity. And appreciating the importance of cybersecurity, following best practice guidelines, and implementing strong um, protective and monitoring controls can help to foster and maintain a safe financial ecosystem. The central bank, aside from the work being done internally, as part of its regulatory framework, requires supervised financial institutions to conduct regular cybersecurity assessments to evaluate the strength of their cybersecurity posture. And at the national level, there is also the Data Protection Act, the Bahamas Computer Misuse Act, and more recently, the National Cybersecurity Strategy, each of which prescribes some guidelines and or protections for constituents. And I would encourage all of you to familiarize yourselves with each of these documents. Again, the Data Protection Act, the Data Protection Privacy Act 2003, the Bahamas Computer Misuse Act, and then the National Cybersecurity Strategy. So then, in closing, I would just wish to reiterate the importance of cybersecurity to enable digital banking and thereby support the maintenance of a sound financial ecosystem that is able to secure and maintain the trust and confidence of its constituents. So thank you very much for your attention today and for joining this session. And I'll now turn it over for any questions that the audience may have.
Thank you, Luther. I think you provided a very holistic view of the issues and challenges that can arise from cybersecurity, but as well as the benefits and rewards that we can enjoy from its use. I think it was pretty holistic in the sense that you spoke to the role that individuals have to play in the process in terms of being responsible and providing some tips on how they can use digital platforms, but in a safer way, but as well as the importance of the regulator and financial institutions, the roles they have to play in terms of making sure and make that their systems are secure, and that a good cybersecurity framework is in place. I see that we have one question so far in the chat. So for the persons on the call, please feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask a question, or you can do as Ms. Gardner did and drop your question inside the chat feature. But just to start, my question is whether I know that the subject matter is very um, dense, and there's probably quite a lot of material out there on it. Do you have any recommendations in terms of resources that people can go to learn more about cybersecurity and safe digital practices? Um, that's my first question. And the second is when we know that recently we've had quite a bit of, we would see malicious texts or WhatsApp messages or videos on social media. And sometimes, I mean, depending on who's viewing them, you can automatically say, okay, this is not, this is not right. I don't think this is, a legitimate offer or legitimate engagement. But for others, it might be not as straightforward and plain to them. So the question there is, what what sort of tips would you have for those individuals so that they, if they encounter a WhatsApp messages, what about the message can hint to them that it's not something that's legitimate? Um, and of course, we would always recommend that persons go to the source, so they try to verify directly with the institution if this is something that they sent out. But what else do you think they can perhaps do to, not fall victim to these threats?
Right. So thank you, Latoya, for your question. So in terms of, I'll take the answer in response to the first one. In terms of websites that can provide education around safe digital practices, right? I guess there's so many. I mean, there's such a vast amount of information and wealth of information out there. What I would encourage is that as opposed to prescribing a specific website, what I would encourage is that persons leverage your likes of your Google, your search engines, and just simply search for safe online security practices. And there are a number of credible resources that will come up and provide you with a wealth of information in terms of what are the types of controls that you should consider employing and how to go about employing them. I think that is the guidance that I would give in that instance, right? Because again, as you would have clearly indicated, there's so much information out there right now. It's very easy to get. As it relates to these type of fraud campaigns, whether they be by email, whether they be by AI. I think one of the things that we have to do as individuals is remain uh, curious and also to always be wary of um, unsolicited unsolicited emails, right? Also, too, I mean, if it sounds too good to be true, more than likely, it is, right? And then I know one of the things that we're working on from an institution perspective is to try to um, get some other brand messaging out. So I say that in the sense that individuals should really come to try to understand too the financial institutions that they on board with. Understand what are their typical methods of communication, right? Because then they can look at some of these messages that they receive and the forums in which they receive them in, and be a little bit more suspicious, or view them in a more suspicious manner as to whether or not this is really credible. And at the end of the day, call into the institution to confirm, right? There are other more technical means by which you can identify, if something is fraudulent. So, for instance, with links, um, you can hover over the link with your cursor, and it will probably show you. And if it differs drastically from what is visually being represented to you um, um, as the link itself, when you hover over it and it shows you where it's actually being redirected to, typically that's an indication of something that is perhaps fraudulent or could be of some threat. So really, I think it's just a matter of always remaining suspicious and asking questions. Sometimes we're too hasty, or we're too attracted to what is seeming to be a good offer, right? And I think we just need to be a little bit more reserved in that sense, because with the advent of artificial intelligence, these types of, particularly as they affect the consumer, the customer, these types of threats are going to look and appear more and more real. So it's really going to be a combination of the organizations, the institutions, the financial institutions themselves getting the message out about their brand, about their communication strategy, how they approach it with their customers, and the customers being aware and knowledgeable about that, so that they can make more informed decisions make more informed decisions about the messages that they receive and how they respond to them. But it's a slippery slope.
Agreed. So we have a few questions in in the chat, and the first and second both relate to the VPN. I think people want to know a little bit more about um how that works, and you know how you can go about getting this
So
item.
right, so there are a number of products that you can purchase online. Um, I'm not by any means advertising any of them, but just to give an example, so that you can start your own investigation. One of the more prevalent ones is NordVPN, and essentially, what it does is it just secures any communication that you're having between your endpoint and the internet, right? And it would prevent your communication from being intercepted. Whatever communication is intercepted would be unintelligible to the person that is intercepting it, and that's why I would have encouraged that, as far as possible, you want to stay away from using public Wi-Fi. But if you find yourself in an emergency situation, then the inclination would be to use it to either get that message out or to get that phone call out. But I would discourage you from performing any type of, absent of having a VPN installed, I would discourage you from sharing any sensitive information or accessing your bank accounts, and so forth and the likes, because again, um, those networks can very easily be compromised. And in the event that you do have to use them on any regular basis, then again, purchasing a VPN product like a NordVPN would help in mitigating against that potential risk of having your data or information intercepted across the wire.
Thank you. I don't see. Okay, does someone else have a question? So I think the next question in the box appears to be inquiring about whether or not We have the learning series events publicly accessible, and whether or not this one will be as well. And so we do have all, if not, okay, we have all, if not most of the learning series events on our YouTube channel, um, which is accessible to the public. And this one will be as well. So if you go to we'll probably put them on the website as well, provide links to the YouTube channel on our website as well. But they are publicly available. There's a question about the PayPal platform. I think that's for you, Luther.
So what about platforms? Okay,
Sorry.
just looking at the question now. So what about platforms like PayPal? I signed up and then received a lot of fraudulent purchases. How do I deal with something like this? Interesting. I think at the how do we approach this? I think at the end of the day, um, trying to get a sense of what would have potentially led to the compromise, and is it one of those situations where perhaps um, your credentials may have been compromised through some other online forum. So you remember when we spoke about using the same password across multiple platforms, and I'm purely speculating here. Um, you know, it having been, if it was potentially compromised, if you were using the same passwords on for multiple accounts, and that account was one account was compromised, perhaps that could have been an entryway for someone to get access to your PayPal account. But dealing with this specific matter at hand, you're receiving fraudulent purchases. I think as much as you can do now is, um, as much as it provides, update your security settings on your PayPal account. Obviously, first step is to report it to PayPal so you can have it investigated. But to the extent possible, um, increase your security settings to the extent that PayPal would allow. And use the aside username and password aside, also to ensure that multi-factor authentication, where available, is also deployed. But I think in a situation like that, really without knowing more, I think that's pretty much as much as you can do. So really start to take those precautionary and proactive steps to secure your account as best as possible. But PayPal is likewise accountable. I mean, as a service provider. Um, so, what mechanisms, questions need to be asked in terms of what mechanisms do they have in place to detect potentially fraudulent activity? Because it may have very well been that the fraudulent purchases that were made were outside of a pattern that you may have established, right? And their ability um, to be able to detect those type of anomalies, you would like to believe that they would have those in place, as many banks have now. I think when I alluded to the Bangladesh incident, even though the transactions were initiated by the Bank of Bangladesh, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, through its cyber capabilities, fraud detection capabilities, were able to mitigate um, a lot of the damage that could have arisen. So I think you also need to look at and put question to and understand what type of controls PayPal has in place to limit or mitigate against this type of fraudulent activity. So I think it's a multi-layered approach that would have to be looked at.
So good morning all. So Luther, I have three questions here in the Q&A. The first one is asking, is a VPN necessary if you're using Global Protect via a mobile phone?
Right. So no, it isn't, because the Global Protect is a VPN in and of itself. So for those that have the Global Protect VPN, once it's active, the important thing is ensuring that it's activated. Then there would be no need to have a third party VPN. For those that are part of institutions or enterprises, and they're using their corporate devices, and by virtue of that, their organization would have deployed some type of VPN software on their device. Then the recommendation here is that when you connect to those Wi-Fi hotspots, that you likewise enable that VPN. So it really doesn't matter which VPN you use. The idea is just to ensure that you activate some VPN to provide a level of secure communication between yourself and the internet. So Global Protect is fine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Another question here says, you spoke about the use of passwords on mobile devices and gave a warning of password reuse. Do you have any suggestion for how to create a secure password or how passwords can be managed?
Right. So there are password managers, right? Which is another application that you can purchase, right? And I think these password managers, number one, they allow you to create complex passwords, and it also serves as a repository to save the passwords as well. So you don't necessarily have to rely on memory, because a lot of times we resort to either simple passwords and are reusing passwords because it's just too much to keep up with mentally, right? It requires just too much headspace. So password manager applications will definitely assist with that, and I would support or encourage persons to consider using them.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luther. So there's another one. We are often told that passwords should not be used across multiple systems. How does this apply to environments where multiple systems utilize Active Directory credentials?
Right. I like I like that question. So I guess there is and I guess the question is more so related to the enterprise, but I look at it like this, right? There are some inherent risks in leveraging single sign on, and or leveraging again your same Active Directory credentials to access these multiple environments. The same risk to a large extent still generally applies, right? But what we have by virtue of the enterprise is that we're able to put in place other additional mitigating controls that can limit the exposure that comes about as a result of using the same passwords in multiple environments. So it's not, so that recommendation or that guideline more so is prescribed for users, and not necessary, and doesn't necessarily fully translate in the same way to an enterprise environment, because there are a number of additional controls that would be put in place to mitigate against the exposure that is presented there. All right. But it's a very good question. Very insightful question, actually. I appreciate that one. But again, too, just to extend that a little bit further, um, monitoring um, and stringent access control policies are some of the tools or mechanisms that are deployed within an enterprise to kind of scale that back a bit, that exposure back.
Okay, thank you. One more question for you. What new cybersecurity measure is the bank considering to implement in 2025 and beyond to mitigate against emerging risk, AI-driven attacks, quantum computing progress, and increasingly sophisticated social engineering?
Right. So, okay. So let's deal with the quantum computing one first, right? So that's something that we're really just starting to look at, right, and understand to get an appreciation for what exposures it would present for the bank. Clearly, if we adopt quantum computing, there are definitely some efficiency and productivity gains that may result just based on its ability to process information so much faster. But at the same time, um, on the cybersecurity front, we have a specific interest in terms of, from a threat actor perspective, what this may mean in terms of um, uh, the viability of the current encryption protocols that we deploy now to protect our data. Because what's being suggested is that with the advent of quantum computing, we may very well render those obsolete. So the challenge now is, how do we assess that in terms of, okay, how real is that, right? And what do we do now to try to transition to a more secure environment, or a more resilient encryption algorithms, and that are resilient to quantum computing? And that's something that we're just now really starting to look into. From a social engineering standpoint, um, one of the key things is that we are continually looking at how we can enhance and or improve our information security awareness campaigns, right? Because at the end of the day, it really, from a social engineering perspective, it really starts with the users, right? Um, the bank's staff, the enterprises staff, the users of the systems. So really making them aware of the risk, the threats, the forms, the ways to go about detecting them. That is going to be critical. But beyond that, where, or in addition to that, I should say, we're continually looking at additional controls, security controls that we can put in place to provide additional levels of protection, right? And this is ongoing. And as the threats evolve, as I would have alluded to in the presentation, as the threats evolve, the security mechanisms um, also become more advanced and are targeted or are designed to mitigate against a lot of these threats. But I would want to reiterate that a lot of what we need to be doing comes down to some of the fundamentals, right? Um, a lot of times we don't need to throw a lot of resources on our fancy tools at some of the threats that we're exposed to. It really just comes down to adhering to some of the basic fundamental best practice from a cybersecurity perspective, right? And these are, ensuring that antivirus is deployed, ensuring that you're using a firewall. If you find a USB drive in the parking lot, you don't pick it up and just stick it into your computer. In an enterprise environment, you want to try to restrict access to those ports for storage devices to kind of limit that exposure. And then on the AI front, um, though from a cybersecurity perspective, it's been a great benefit to us. We've deployed it in some instances to assist with threat detection and mitigation. But again, we see the risk that it presents as well in terms of being able to, um, generate these deep fakes, as well as perhaps the opportunity to poison data is a real risk as well when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning, because really and truly, the technology is really responding to the information that it receives. So ensuring that the artificial intelligence and machine learning environment is protected from data that can potentially poison it and lead to bad output is something that we need to be very focused on and mindful of. The central bank is obviously looking at how it can deploy these technologies, but in a very safe manner. Without getting into any specific details, the idea is that we all see the value and benefit from artificial intelligence, and it's just a matter of identifying what the use cases are, that where it can be applied, and then ensuring that we do that in a safer manner as possible. Did I address all of the questions? Did I miss any part of it?
Based on the ones posted, it appears you answered all of them, Luther. Thank you.
Oh, all right.
Okay, thank you again, Luther. And thanks as well, Tasha. And thank you all for attending this session. I think the discussion and questions were very good. And I trust that we will continue to reap the benefits of digital transformation and digital banking, but just ensure that we do so in a responsible way. As again, Luther highlighted the role we as individuals have to play, the role of the bank, as well as the role of financial service providers and regulated entities. We have to ensure that our systems are shored up and ready to maximize the benefit from digital transactions, as well as the digital transformation that's taking place now. So again, this is the first series session for this year, and we're aiming to have another one in the second half of the year. So please pay attention to emails from the bank, as well as the posts to our social media platforms. If you have any additional questions that you didn't get an opportunity to raise, any suggestions on future topics that you would like us to explore as it relates to the central bank and to the economy and the financial sector, please feel free to share them as well. And you can do so by emailing learning_series at centralbankbahamas.com. So thank you, and I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day.